Please welcome Deesha Dyer.
I would see you at the White House, and you were always such a badass, so poised, so in control, so on top of everything.
This is the story of a woman who battled self-doubt on a journey that took her from community college here in Philly to becoming a power player in the White House.
You are under this extreme pressure, but I think that the Obamas handled it so well. And that's one of the things I got from them, is because I'm like, I don't know how y'all there's some parts I was like, I would have just fought somebody, but like they were so gracious. And I was just like, how are you so gracious?
Did you get to enjoy it like in the moment, or are you enjoying in hindsight?
There was a grief period of being like, if I would have had this feeling and this joy and this light feeling back then, I would have enjoyed it so much more. But I was putting so much pressure on myself, I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have.
Hey friends, and welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. Now, if you are a person, you're just out here putting one foot in front of the other, or you might be the late bloomer like myself. This episode is especially for you because our guest Deesha Dyer knows both realities all too well. Now, she dropped out of college when she realized it just wasn't for her and followed her curiosity, which included becoming a hip hop journalist. She's also a community organizer, right? But in 2009, at 31 years old, she was taking classes part-time at the Community College of Philadelphia when she became a White House intern. Yes, an intern at 31 years old. In just a few years, Deesha became the White House social secretary in the Obama administration, aka better times, right? Being a social secretary means that she planned and arranged all the events for the president and the first lady. Now, in her memoir called Undiplomatic, How My Attitude Created the Best Kind of Trouble, I love that title, Deesha shares her unlikely rise and how accepting the challenge to just figure things out, she just kept doing that over and over again, accepting that challenge changed her whole entire life. Now, if anything, you will absolutely leave this conversation with an appreciation for where you are, even if it doesn't meet your timeline. And I hope that you walk away feeling like where I am is exactly where I need to be. Let me tell you, I didn't know Deesha beforehand. I just saw she was doing a lot of interviews and wanted to know more. I just found her story to be so amazing. And this podcast has been a vehicle where I've been able to meet so many dope people. And this is just another one of those just dope conversations. I just so enjoyed, it was like a sister girl time, right? I just so enjoyed chatting with Deesha and felt so inspired by her experience and what her experiences taught her. I hope you feel the same way. So without further ado, here's Deesha. Well, Deesha, thank you so much for being here. First, congratulations on all the success of the book. How does that feel? It's hard to put your story out there.
Yes. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. And I mean, I just can't believe that the book is out. If for so long, you take so long, like thinking about, is it going to be okay? Like, what's going to be the final chapters? How this is going to be? What are going to be the names of it? What's going to be the title and the cover? So the fact that it's out is such a relief of being like, whew, it's done. And I have no control over how it's received, but I can only do my best, getting it prepared for people to digest it. So it's been great. I've been hearing a lot of great comments and feedback back. And so it's been good. It's been good.
And Undiplomatic, the title, unpack that for us.
Yeah. So interesting enough, my husband came up with the title and we kept trying to think of something that really was kind of in the political world, but not strictly a political title. Mm-hmm. And then we were talking about the show, The Diplomat. And I was like, we were just kicking around words. And I said, I want something to be like untraditional. Like I came this in an untraditional way, or I'm not like everyone else, or and so he just said undiplomat. And I was like, what about undiplomatic? And we were like, that's it.
That's it.
For me, it's to say that, I came a non-traditional way. I did not come the diplomatic way. Didn't even know what that meant. and it worked out for me. And that's okay if we are, there's parts of ourselves that are different from everyone else or not as traditional or what anything else, but you still, when you're called to an assignment, you still, can go after that.
I was learning more about you. I was like cheering along the way because I'm like, shout out to the late bloomers. Shout out.
That's us. That's us.
That's us. Where the plans just didn't go as
Mm-mm.
planned.
Mhm.
How did you keep going though, in that, like saying, okay, I wanted to be here, or I thought my life would look like this, when life didn't look like how you thought it would look? How did you keep going?
That's a great question. And what I'll say is, I didn't have the expectation of like right now, I feel like where we are in 2024, and I'm 46.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have the expectation of like, you have to, go to college, graduate, get an amazing career, make all these Forbes lists or anything. I didn't have any of those. And so for me, I was just kind of going off of curiosity and just being like, I'm keeping myself alive. I never
Mhm.
even thought like, oh my gosh, I'm so poor or I'm so bad. I just was just like, this is just how life is. And I had
Mhm.
jobs, I had a roof, I had the basics. And so for me, that was enough versus it being like I had to overachieve or I had to go to these lengths. And so I think for me, I kept going because it was kind of just like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, how
Mhm.
else am I supposed to live? There was no other option of being like, well, I guess I can go move in with so and so, or there weren't none of these options whenever the obstacles presented themselves. And so I had to push through. Whether I knew what I was doing or not was another story. I was just like, I was like, I don't really know. So I'm just going to do this and hope it works. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's how I kept pushing through. And then once I got the internship at the White House and then went on to work at the White House, it became this whole like, what else? What more can I do? Like, what more can I conceive for
Mhm.
myself? And so it became a little bit of a, an addiction of figuring out how much greatness I could achieve because I'd never known that I could do something as significant as that.
But I think now in retrospect, when people are like, oh, you were a 31-year-old intern, like, look at how amazing it turned out for you. But I would think in the moment, like, you're 31, being an intern, an unpaid internship, like, that's a big decision. Even if it's
Yeah,
I think now people are like, of course, for the Obama White House, I would
yeah,
do
yeah,
anything for but it's like, but you're a grown woman. You had
100%.
real life responsibilities,
100%.
so talk about how you, knowing what you know now, how do you assess opportunity? Because I think that sometimes people only think opportunity has to like come with a check, and it's a
Hmm.
really difficult thing, because we talk about transitions here, and
Hmm.
so I've had to do a lot for free,
Yeah, yeah.
like.
Yes. And I think that the thing is, we're in a monetized culture, which it's tough because especially Black women, we don't get paid our worth many a
Mhm.
time. So we have a history of that. And so we are already heightened to be like, you trying not to pay me? Like, what I mean?
Right,
And
right.
I mean, we're
Right,
already like on alert for that.
right.
So I think everything that comes to us, we're like, are you trying to get over on me?
Hmm.
Or is this an opportunity that will pay off in other ways? And I think again, it was 2009, so it's 15 years ago that I became an intern, and I didn't even think about the fact that it was unpaid because I was like, I've been in a situation before where I haven't had a lot of money and I had to make it work, and I was going to get a job, so I was like, I'll get a job at night to make sure I can have some money, and that didn't bother me to do that, like,
Hmm.
but I think that now I look at opportunities as number one, is this a hobby? Like, is this something I just love to do? So maybe it's something I love to do and there's no money attached, but like, it fills me with joy or something. So I kind of put that in one bucket. Then I put in a bucket of just like, okay, if I'm not getting paid what I want for this, or
Hmm.
if they don't have the money, if it's a nonprofit or something like that, what can I get off of this? Can they buy books for their board, or can they, put my name in the alumni newsletter so it goes to a bunch of people,
Hmm.
somebody who may be a CEO at a company, and then book me for something. And then I have the other bucket of just like, no, I need to be paid for this. Like, I need to be
Hmm.
paid for my time, I need to be paid for my effort. But it's really hard to assess those opportunities sometimes because you are so used to, like, especially if you come from a poverty mindset, you're like, you want to take whatever you can get because you're like, I don't know I need this little money. I need this little so-and-so. So it's getting to the point, it's a privilege to get to the point where you can turn things down, because sometimes we can't do that. And I will say that I'm not always in the position to say, okay, I should be getting 15,000, but you only have 8. Like, I need to take the 8. So it's a assessing by just like every individual opportunity and where I am in life at the time.
Has that changed now?
It has changed. I think part of it has changed because I have another income, which is my husband, right? So I have another. I didn't have that before, but I think it's also like I now have savings and I now have things where I'm just like, I need to take a gamble on myself and say I'm worth more than this. And I know you have the money because most of the time, I'm sure as you've come across, most of the time people that try to be cheap are like these companies that have money. And you're just like, you got all this money and you legit can't, give me the extra 3,000 or 5,000 I'm asking for. And so I feel better walking away from those opportunities because there is a little bit of a cushion there, but it's still hard because it's still like a poverty mindset of like, when will that cushion go away? So yeah.
No, we've had guests who are talking about that even when you get to the point, like sometimes it takes your mindset a little bit longer to catch up because you know what it's like, another reality. Yeah. And just as a social secretary at the White House, which meant that you had to plan all of the events, how did you know what to do? Like, I'm thinking about like the state dinners with all these leaders and the nuances in culture and like, how did you know what to do?
This is the thing is the job was so amazing and so detailed and so specific, but the core details of how to do it, from organizing a schedule to asking for help to saying, okay, we need food, so let's go talk to the chef and see what the chef and the first lady want. Those details are really already in me. Those are foundational things where I love to organize. Like, I'm type A, so I love to put things in order. I love to ask people just like, can you help me do this? I love to lean on people and their expertise. And so even when I didn't like know exactly what I was doing, I was like, okay, but this person does. Because as a social secretary, you work with so many amazing folks, including folks that are the resident staff, like the butlers, the ushers, the chefs, the florists, like all the cater, like all of that. And they actually are there through administrations. And so I could say like, hey, like I've never done a state dinner before, but when, you all did this before, where could I find the paperwork? And so everything's kept. And so I think I just leaned on people. I used the core skills that I have of just like welcoming people in, inclusion, asking questions, organizing to get things done. And so although the job was extremely hard, and this is a lot of jobs, like you adapt to the environment, but the core elements of who you are, what you know how to do is a skill, that's all that you need because you'll learn everything else on the job. And so for me, that's what I did. And, even before the White House, I was organizing events. So it was just like, oh, this is just like what I used to do, but on obviously a way grander
On
scale.
steroids.
Exactly. Good way to put it.
But it's interesting because President Obama and the First Lady were like doing what was done, but always with a twist. So is that where you felt like you could shine because it was like with a twist that you could just bring yourself in there and kind of your sensibilities a lot more?
100%. I mean, I think the president and first lady, they had a lot of great ideas and they were creative in their own right of how they wanted to open up the White House, especially the first lady. And so I would just take cues from her, or I would take direction from her. And then she says, like, like it'd be great if we had like, music. I would explore, like, do you want a live DJ? Do you want a live band? Do you want an HBCU band? Do you just want a playlist? Like, do you want to have a Marine band? So I would then take whatever idea that she has presented, and I would find options for that idea. And so that allowed me to tap into my creativity or into my background as a hip hop journalist or into my background as like, loving music and knowing people or being in the marching band or dance team back in the day. So I would dive into that. And that allowed me to use my resources, bring people into the White House, who I knew, right? And I got very lucky and blessed that it was for the Obamas because they were very trusting of me when they didn't have to be. They were very trusting of me. So it was great. And so, yeah, I mean, they allowed me to just shine and to bring myself to the table. Sometimes it was met with like, why don't we look at a different option? But they always heard me out, which I'm so thankful for because I felt valued in my job.
How did that help your creativity? Just
Mm,
for, you have all the resources at your disposal, right? Like
mm.
people you invite are going to say, especially the Black folks, especially that second term, it was just so Black. All the videos I saw, I was like, it was so Black. It was like QUE Black. Like it was so Black. And it was
Mm.
like everybody was just having a great time. What was it like for you? And you're like, oh, we can actually do it this way, because a lot of what they did too was just bringing a soul into the White House, which you all
Mhm,
did in a way that it had never existed, where
mhm.
it's just like I would think about if I ever thought, because I'm from the DC area, so it's
Oh,
like, growing up on like White House tours and stuff, and it was very like, you know,
yeah, yes, robotic.
not warm, robotic, like not
Yeah.
warm.
Mhm,
You're just like, wow, it's the White House. Or going to the Easter egg roll and stuff like
mhm.
that. But it didn't have a little. You might have had like there was Webster at the
Yeah.
Easter egg roll that I remember seeing, and that very much excited me.
No.
Yeah, when I was little, I got a picture.
That's a throwback right there.
Yeah,
You said Webster, and I was like,
Webster.
talking about Webster, the show? Little
Yeah, yeah.
Webster?
He was there when I was there. But that's as Black as it got, okay?
Yeah.
And then I see all these people partying, and I was like, I want to be at the White House with the Obamas.
Yeah, it's so, what I say is like, I'm the second Black social secretary. Desiree
Mhm,
Rogers was the first. She was the
mhm,
first Obama social secretary. And I think that just the Obama presence in themselves made it number one so Black because you would walk in the house, even if it was just like a tour or it was just, like the Easter egg or just anything, you walk in there and I feel like you would just feel it. Like you would feel a Black family lives there. And there
mhm,
is a different dynamic when you're walking into this historically white institution and you know that a Black family occupies this space, like two parents and kids and a grandmother. And I think that that in itself made people feel a little bit warm and welcomed, especially Black people, right? And I
mhm,
think that it signified all the things from the campaign that we had wished for and we had hoped for and these feelings of inclusion and this magical feeling. So I think that part of it was an automatic with President Obama and Mrs. Obama
mhm,
being there. But I think the other part was because they were their own celebrities in their own right. And so we
mhm,
never had to be like when people came into the White House, they were like the second and to the Obamas. And so there
mhm.
wasn't this like ego. There wasn't this like,
Got
people understood that like, you could do this certain number of songs or you could have this many people. Like, they weren't catered to in many ways like they would be in the outside world, although we treated them very well.
it.
But I
Mhm,
will tell you though, which is interesting, is we did have people in the second term say no to like performing or anything else. And part of that is because they'd either performed already for the Obamas in some capacity,
mhm.
but then also we couldn't pay. Like we weren't able to take like taxpayer dollars and be like,
Oh,
okay,
right.
we can pay Beyonce or Usher, the whatever million that, it
Mhm,
costs. And so sometimes we had to get creative with being like, like this person said no simply because like they can get, $10 million or whatever playing for another Fourth of July celebration.
got
And
it.
so sometimes we did get that, but that just allowed us to be like, that's okay. Like there's so many other artists out there that perhaps are undiscovered,
Mhm,
they can really use this White House on their resume or social media or whatever.
mhm.
So let's tap into that talent. And so that's what it really allowed us to do, which was really great. So yeah.
That is awesome. Is there a cultural, I don't know, practice or things that you had to like be aware of that was so new to you or that you thought was cool?
Yeah,
Just
what I would
curious.
say is like the cultural things that I had to really learn was when we did state dinners, like the likeness, like we had to learn what the other countries like likes and dislikes were, what would offend them. And it was a whole briefing with the State Department of just like, like no yellow flowers for this country. And, soup is considered offensive when you're eating a fancy dinner because you got to slurp. So no in this country or like and it was just and I would just be like, are you serious? Because to me, I'm like, I'm putting on a dinner, like, you're gonna get the flowers you're gonna get, like they look nice, like they're gonna be beautiful, but just like these little nuances of culture I had to learn. And that really was interesting. As I always tell people, the state dinners are the social part of a state visit. They have a whole meeting and they have a press conference, but understand that if the state dinner doesn't go well and we offend somebody, that could set a precedence for the rest of the visit. And so we had to be really careful of being like, let's make sure we're setting the scene, the atmosphere for business, that we welcome them, that we want them here, that we respect their country and their culture. And that was hard for me because I was just like, why can't we have yellow flowers? Like it was just like, can't we do this? And so learning that was just like, but it also was just like kind of interesting and intriguing too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's I think what I paid attention to a lot more than I had never thought about is the nonverbal, especially with the Obamas since they're under a
Mhm.
microscope. So from everything of who was the designer of Mrs. Obama's dress
Mhm.
to all of the things just to make them feel welcome and to say like we are, rolling out a red carpet
Mhm.
for you. We are
Mhm.
welcoming you to our country. So
Mhm.
that's amazing. I do want
Right.
to get to a big part of your book where you're talking about imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
where you've just talked about that kind of a lot on your book tour as well. Is what was your biggest fear? Like, what was it that triggered it so much for you?
Yeah, I think that there's two different answers to that. I think that, what triggered it, I think, was, being in an environment where I felt like, you know, being myself was not, encouraged, or it was not, there was no space for it. And so like, and I would do that to myself many times, right? I would,
Hmm.
I would, get, at the White House and be like, this is not a space for me. Like, I don't, look the part or sound the part or anything else. And so I would automatically be triggered that I don't belong there, that, I'm only here because of luck. And so those
Hmm.
triggers really had a lot to do with me, or it had to do with like meeting an authority figure who then affirmed that, just like, oh, this, like, Deesha should, do this better or whatever. And I'd be like, I take so offense to it sometimes because I'm just like, I didn't know how to take feedback. Everything sounded like critique to me. Like it was just all
Wow.
negative. And sometimes it was, to keep it 100, like it was
Hmm.
unnecessary. But like a lot of times it was, I was very much triggered by, oh my gosh, these people aren't seeing me, do my best and be at my best. That means I'm not worth it. And so that's kind of what triggered from it. I think the fear for me was really being found out, like being like
Hmm.
getting an assignment or getting a position and being like, I can't fake my way through this. Like I can't, like I really don't know what I'm doing. Like, and I don't know how to ask for help without people being like, making me feel like I'm stupid or something. And the interesting part about that is it's just like I was never faking. I don't think any of us are ever faking our way through. We're actually doing it. Not like we
Hmm.
can like send a hologram. You know what I'm saying? Like for us. Like we can't send a proxy. So we're never faking it. And I think that I just always had this feeling, this fear that somebody's gonna be like, like we knew she wasn't gonna be any good. Or like the
Hmm.
Obamas would be like, oh, like Deesha, this is just not, and which wasn't ever the case from them. So it was all kind of, I won't say it's in my head because there are systems that feed that, especially for Black women,
Hmm.
on making us feel powerless in that way by attacking our mental health and our self-esteem and our confidence. But I would say that a lot of it was I had to go to therapy and like dig it up. And because it wasn't about being at the White House, it was about something that happened before, that the residue is still inside of me, and trying to figure that out. So yeah.
And so, in going to therapy, because I know you were talking about how it like physically showed up for you in your health, like,
Mm,
and like, how were what worked for you to begin to unpack that?
yeah. I would say that I would love to sit here and say like, therapy and, that was definitely what worked. But I also understand that therapy is not accessible for everyone. But I think that really why I even started on read down the journey of being like, there's a problem here is because I got physically sick at the White House at a point, and I was more concerned about showing up for the job than like being sick. Like, I mean, and it was like sick. And so it wasn't a situation where it was just like a cold or like a stomach, like my stomach hurts now, like my stomach. It was like, I'm going to go to work, even if I'm, should be home resting or at the hospital or something like that. And to me, I like looked at myself in the mirror and my face was bloated. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like something's not okay that you're willing to risk like your health for a job. And even though it was the White House, it was still not okay. And so that was the trigger for me. And I think that like that was the catalyst to kind of go get help. But I think that when I did, I went to therapy like most of us do, like thinking it worked like, Swiss Smith. You pour the water in, you mix it with the little cocoa and we good. Like, go ahead and fix my life. Like,
Yeah, right.
I'm paying you. But then I realized it was more deeper about that. So I think that once I accepted that imposter syndrome was something that was basically, a tool of oppression for me that makes us feel like something's our fault by feeding into these systems. I had to then talk about my past and talk about when it first started and go back and dig up the root. And that's what did it for me because my therapist started making comparisons between how I feel now and authority figures now with some authority figures or family back then and how that was cemented in me back then. And so that kind of did it for me, but it was a work in progress. I mean, it's still a work in progress to keep it 100. Like it's an everyday thing for me. But I feel like the weight is lifted off of me to be able to at least walk in joy and understand that I deserve to be in my rightful place. And so that's hopefully, what people also get from the book.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to enjoy? Did you get to enjoy like
Mm,
in the moment, or are you
mm.
enjoying in hindsight?
That's a good question. I'd say both. I'd
Mhm.
say that, it's one of the things that comes with when, you do healing is the grief. And I was talking to my therapist about this. There is a grief period of being like, if I would have had this feeling and this joy and this light, this light feeling back then, I would have enjoyed it so much more. But I was putting so much pressure on myself, I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. I did definitely have good times there, had fun, like, parties were great, like meeting people was great. I loved my job, but I think that there was a part of me that was being reserved because I just always was just like I can't show that I'm having too much fun, or I can't like because I don't want people to be like, she's just here to party or she's just here to whatever. So I think that there were points I did enjoy it, but I think that there are also points I look back and be like, oh, if I would have been a little easier on myself, if I'd have been a little bit more friendly, if I would have been whatever, I probably would have had a better time. So yeah.
On the outside, I would assume, and I don't know if this is right or not, but just the scrutiny that that White House was under every
Mhm.
single day, I would assume that everybody felt that way
Yeah.
because you couldn't make, I mean, now it's everything's a hot mess and anything goes. But when you were there, like you could not, there was
Mm-mm.
no room for error, none.
Zero. Zero. And there was no room for error and there was no do-overs. And so it wasn't like, if I messed up or something was wrong with the Pope visit, it wasn't like, oh well, we have another one next week. So there was a whole like this is a one time only. Like there, he's going to do a press conference on this, issue or whatever. Like he's not gonna say like, okay, I'm gonna try this again next week. Like there was never that. And so I think that we were such under a microscope, especially as social secretary, because like people were looking for things to like mess up, or they were looking for dinner guests to crash again, or they were looking for, the Black woman to do something that is unbecoming of the White House or whatever else. And so you are under this extreme pressure. But I think that the Obamas handled it so well. And that's one of the things I got from them is because I'm like, I don't know how y'all like there are some parts I was like, I would have just fought somebody, but like they were so gracious, and I was just like, how are you so gracious, and so they led by example when it came to that, it's just like kind of being calm under pressure. And sure, they had probably moments, outside of that that they were just like, they could let their hair down and like be like this was jacked up or whatever, but they went there as a calm and a bombing spirit, which is interesting because people always say now they read my book and they're just like, oh, it's a feeling that, like it was such a good time. It was such a, and I'm just like, yeah, that's the feeling that they brought to the table. So yeah.
That's amazing. So, what does Deesha now, after being exposed from you're talking about how you were kind of like in survival mode, you just kind of did what the next best thing was for you? Like, all right, this works now, this works now. From that woman who entered the White House as an intern to now having traveled the world, having done all these things, what do you know now that you didn't know then? How has that exposure changed you fundamentally?
Um, I mean, so much. I mean, I think, you know, I know that, I'm older now. So I think there's a maturity that comes with it. But I think that, those sayings about like, live your life in joy and, live every day to make yourself happy, all these things, I was just like, that sounds a little corny. Like, these affirmations sound real corny and like live your life in joy. Yeah, but I gotta work. So I think
Right.
like there are things that now I can understand what those things mean. I think that I've shed a lot of the what will people perceive me as, or what will people think about me if I do XYZ? Will they think that I'm a fraud? Will they think I'm stupid, or will they think whatever? I've shed a lot of that because it's not only just because I have this amazing resume, obviously, of what I did, but it's because just like I am a person who is a flawed person who doesn't always, do the right thing sometimes, although I try. And I accept that because I'm a human being. And so now I walk forward with less fear, less, fear of my failures. Like even I did a presentation on Monday for a bunch of young scholars, and there was a word spelled wrong in my presentation. And I think that the Deesha of yesteryear would have like been crushed and been like, oh my gosh. Instead, I was just like, well, we just laughed about it. And I was like, see, y'all, like I'll be making mistakes too. And they were all laughing about it. And so I think I walk forward with being like, I'm just going to walk forward in this joy and this authenticity, knowing that there are consequences to that, knowing that, I'll lose people along the way, and that's okay. I accept the consequences of being a truth teller, that people will talk about me and I may not be included in this group, or I may not, whatever. And that's okay for me. So I think I've learned a lot about myself and to just enjoy things, despite what, anybody says or what anybody thinks. And that's something I never thought I'd ever say, or I'd ever get to, because I was so worried about fitting in and making sure people knew I was real and making sure people knew I was fun. And now I'm just like, I'm damn near 50. I'm too old for that. I'm not doing that anymore. Sorry.
Right. So our last segment is called Act Up ACT. Those are my initials. So
Cool.
we're going to shout out the late bloomers, right? So for all the late bloomers who are like, what the hell? Like, when is it going to be my turn? When is it going to happen for me? What would you say that they need to do today to help them get closer to where they want to be?
This is what I would say. I would say that there is no wasted time. Like everything that you are currently doing is a purpose to it. When I was a hip hop journalist, I had no idea that I would be then booking hip hop at the White House, 14, 20 years later, right? There's always a purpose to what you do. So I think that instead of, to me, focusing on where I need to be, I would instead focus on what I'm doing now and how that will get me to where I am, right? Because sometimes we can't take the extra class, we can't afford the whatever, we can't go on this networking event, we can't go to this retreat, and then we feel bad about like, oh, that probably could have helped me get to the step I want to get to. So instead of that, like look at what you're doing now and what makes you happy in those moments and what will help you get to the next step of wherever it is from what you currently have. Because I feel like we always look outside of ourselves and external things to like help us get further in some way or to help build us up in some way, which is great. But then we miss all the things that we currently possess and we currently are doing that are doing the same thing because we're looking for more and looking for more. So what I would tell people is slow down on the looking for more and look at what you have right in front of you, right there, that will get you where you want to be. And also understand that where you want to be is going to change as you change. And so there was a point in time where I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. Well, that's no longer. There's a time I wanted to be a psychologist. That's no longer. So give yourself the grace to learn who you are, to then possibly, adjust to what you want to do in the future. And nothing is late. Everything is on time. Everything is on time. Like like there are certain terms I'm just like, I had a great life. Like I didn't have plans to go to college. So I didn't really care that I dropped out, to be honest. It was like, but that didn't mean that I was, late. It just was like, that wasn't for me at the time. And going back to college at 28 was, and look what it led to. So yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Deesha, how can we support you and all that you're doing?
I think people can support by following me on Instagram, which is just DEEDYER 267. So D Dyer 267. Continue to tell people about the book, post about it. If people have already bought it, obviously buying the book's the best thing. It's also available in audio. But also if you've bought it and you read it and you like it or listen to it, put a review on, Amazon or Goodreads or something like that. That helps with advertising and all those things. And so just continuing to support me, support the book, but also I think the best way to support me is just like loving yourself and just like not waiting until 40 something to realize how wonderful you are, and supporting the other women, in our lives. There is no competition. Like we all in this together. That's how I feel. So
amen to that. We absolutely are. We're all we got.
Yeah, whatever I got, somebody else, I'll share it. Like
right.
I don't believe in gatekeeping. So I think that's the best way to support.
Thank you, Deesha. We'll put all of that in the show description. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and write a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. And I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.